I'll be honest, I was kinda afraid of watching part 6. After years of saying I'll get to it eventually, and ending up rewatching the entire series, was it going to live up to the anticipation I had? Or was I ultimately going to be disappointed in the direction the story would go, after being let down by rewatching part 5? I had some friends who did watch part 6, but just kinda gave up on it and never came back to it, which also didn't really inspire any confidence. So were my fears unfounded or proven correct? Do I no longer enjoy the newer Jojo parts and just pretend it peaked and ended as Southern Crusaders? Well, let's get into it, as I finally got around to watching JoJo Stone Ocean.
Destiny is mine. 恐れしても全ての未来途切れぬように Should I friend of life?
Part 6 takes place in 2011, in Florida. It is weird thinking that a rocky road is 10 years into the future, which seems to have been the trend ever since part 4, but probably a necessity because otherwise he had to wait 10 years to continue his story with a new family member. Irene, wait a minute. Jolene Cujo is the protagonist of this part. She is the daughter of Jojo and has been convicted for murder and is being sent to jail. Seeing her age, I can only deduce she got born somewhere before the events of part 4, and we never got to see her mother other than in a few flashbacks. She was a bit of a rebellious kid with a good heart, not surprising really, just look at the entire family, you're all the same in that way. And Jojo was never there for her when she got into trouble. I can only assume he was busy tracking down and taking care of some Dio's leftover subordinates and the like. So when she gets a letter from him with a charm before she gets sent to jail, telling her she needs to keep it safe, she gets angry, as he never seemed to care about her, and throws it away. But not before she gets stabbed by something hidden inside the charm, that something being the fragment of a stand arrow. Now, I was fully expecting that this part would revolve around the stand arrow turning the prisoners into stand users for some of the various plans, but I was wrong, partially. In the last part it was shown that Diavola dug up 6 stand arrows, and that one was still unaccounted for, assuming the 5th one was in Dio's hand and Jojo found it after part 3 events. But it seems we're just going to forget about that one being missing. However, the charm with the arrow fragment Jolene throws away does end up creating 2 more stand users by circumstance after the fact. Quest, a side check that it doesn't really matter beyond the 2nd episode, and Aramis, who we'll get to in a bit. Jolene ends up gaining stand powers over the course of the next few days and learns how to use them, making her the first Jojo that doesn't have a stand before the events of the story. Stone Free, the stand in question, can change her body into a threat and manipulate it in various ways. Before watching part 6 I didn't know much of Jolene, but she always looked somehow a bit arrogant and rude to me. I'm not even sure where I got this vibe from. But after watching it I was proven wrong, and I actually ended up quite liking her as she grew on me over the course of the part. Of course the entire reason she ends up in jail is a setup, orchestrated by Pucci, one of Dio's followers and a close friend, for the sole reason of stealing Jojo's memories so he can fulfill Dio's grand plan. In which he succeeds, and with Jojo out of the running, missing his memories and his stand because he turned into a CD disc, Jolene ends up fighting against Pucci's henchmen in order to retrieve the discs and bring her father back to life, as without him he will die in due time. She is joined in this part by Aramis, who she met earlier, who happened to find a pendant she threw away and also got stabbed by the stand arrow. She is in the prison for a personal reason, to track down the murderer of her sister and avenge her by killing him. And it turns out she is the loud and angry person I somehow expected Jolene would be. And she gets a stand ability called Smack. Wait, the original is Kiss. I even trying with these localized names, it doesn't even sound remotely close. Anyway, the stand lets her put a sticker on an object which duplicates it, and if the sticker is ripped off, it will forcefully travel back to its original and merge with it. It might not seem very impressive on first glance, but it is a very handy stand if applied correctly, and even prevents mortal injuries at times. I don't have much to say about Aramis really, other than that despite being of the main group, she's not always with Jolene, and she's absent the entire 2nd batch of episodes other than the start of it. Yes, batch. I'll clear that up later when we have to address the elephant in the room of part 6. The first time these two group up after the first episode is in the wetlands when they end up confronting Foo Fighters, or FF for short, who is protecting Pucci's stash of discs. But who in true Jojo fashion ends up joining them and fighting Pucci after it's all said and done. Foo Fighters is a sentient group of plankton given a stand by Pucci, who ends up inhabiting the dead body of an inmate so they can live and act outside of the water. Other allies are Emporio, a little boy whose mother got killed by Pucci after giving birth to her in the prison, and he is hiding in a hidden room with the help of his stand ever since. Anastasia, Anasui? Diavolo II? No really, why does he look so much like Diavolo? Is this a secret twin or something? There's another ally who immediately ends up falling in love with Jolene on first sight and will do anything to protect her. His stand, Diver Down, can hide inside anything, from walls and floors to even inside other people, and launch surprise attacks from that position. And last but not least, Weather Report, a mysterious man with amnesia and his tentacle control weather, and he seems to have some sort of personal history with Pucci. Pucci is the main antagonist of this part, and he is a priest.
喜べ少女
His stand is White Snake, which primarily has the power to take the stand and memory of people, turning them into discs resembling CDs. He also has the power to send people into hallucination-inducing dreams and melt them down, but that only really gets used once at the start of the season and never again. It can also shapeshift into other people, but that also only gets used once in a big twist later in the story. His plan is... well, we'll get to that a bit later. It is quite a doozy. Let's just get started on the plot of this part, and I will probably get sidetracked here, you have been warned in advance. In the first part of the series we get introduced to Jolene, her backstory, Hermes, and the setting of the prison and all that jazz. Quest serves as an introductionary fight to Jolene and her newly discovered powers, and after that we get to reveal that Jolene was set up by Pucci. Jojo visits her in jail to inform her of this plot and wants to break her out, but the visitation room has a trap, as they get ambushed by Pucci and another one of Dio's loyalists, John Gallier. They manage to fight off and defeat John Gallier, but ultimately Pucci succeeds in his plan and steals Jojo's stand and memories. And the rest of the first third of the part revolves about Jolene getting these discs back, while fighting some of the prisoners that have gotten stands from Pucci that stand in the way. They end up finding Jojo's memory disc hidden in a barn in the wetlands, guarded by Foo Fighters, or is a third-party member who ends up joining them. And with help from Weather Report, she ends up smuggling the disc out of jail, into the hands of the Speedwagon of a nation, who are also keeping Jojo's body safe. That sums up the first part of part 6, all in all, pretty good stuff. We don't spend a full 15 episodes here introducing the main characters like in Golden Wind. The plot is relatively straightforward, and the pace moves along pretty smoothly. Jolene and Hermes beat up some stand users, including this chick who I think is Darby's estranged daughter.
Good.
Weather Report makes it rain frogs, and we all had a good time, except Jojo. It kinda bothers me Jojo rolls up to prison fully well knowing Jolene gets set up for some reason by someone, completely unprepared, and gets banished for the remainder of the show. At least have some stand-using allies on backup in case shit goes wrong, which you know it probably will, but I guess we don't have any conflict or story if he did, so here we are, one plot convenient debuff of stupidity for Jojo. Hey, at least he can use his time stop ability for more than 1 second now, it's an improvement. The second third of the show revolves around Jolene trying to find out who is behind all of this, and she gets sent to the solitary confinement wing of the prison in order to do so. And this is kind of where the pacing comes to a halt. Some of the fights here are not the most interesting. Dragon's Dream gets way too many episodes for how meh of a stand it is. But while fighting here, Jolene spots something weird in the area, a human bone. Dio's bone. Yes, Dio's bone. You heard me right. Which brings me to Pucci's plan. Alright, strap in, this is a doozy. So apparently he was a friend with Dio, and saw him before the events of part 3, and Dio discussed with him a plan of how to reach the heaven. Something he seemingly got obsessed with after he got fished up from the bottom of the ocean at the start of part 3. Whatever this heaven is, it's kind of vague, and I'm still not 100% sure what to make of it by the end of the part. But it seems to be the ability where all humans on Earth can see their future, so they can die without regrets, something like that. So at some point Dio gave Pucci a boner, one of his bones, in order to help him achieve this goal, somehow. Then Dio died by Jojo's hands, and he never got to explain the details to Pucci. So with Dio dead and all his research notes on how to attain heaven gone, he needs the memories of Jojo, who conveniently read these notes before burning them. So he concocted a plan to get Jolene imprisoned, and when Jojo visits her to break her out, steal his memories. Having now used the disc with Jojo's memories and having seen Dio's notes, he revives Dio's bone with the help of a stand user inside the prison. The bone becomes sentient, and it goes on a murder spree inside the prison walls, all according to plan. Eventually the bone, having killed specifically 36 sinners, in this case the inmates, by turning them into plants, transforms into a green baby, which later ends up fusing with Pucci, and it gives him a new stand and a whole bunch of crazy new powers. All the specifics of this plan are that heaven can be obtained at Cape Canaveral at a specific date, so he leaves the prison, which ends the second third of part 6. Well, Jolene and the gang gave chase after they managed to break out of prison, minus Foo Fighters, as they got killed by Pucci when he was trying to get his hands on his green duende. It's a plan alright, it's fake as all hell, and even when reading the extra material about it on the wiki, it just felt that Dio was making up shit as he was going along. This is also the first time ever when watching Jojo where I actually need to refer to extra existing material, to make sense of things going on and clear up the details. Like, why specifically 36 souls of sinners? Well, he compared souls to poker chips thanks to the Darby brothers, and people are supposed to have 10 poker chips representing the soul. And the souls of sinners are more potent apparently. Potent with what? I don't know, soul power I guess. So the total would amount to 360 chips, just as much degrees as one needs to make a full circumference of a clock, and he was convinced that this would grant his stand new powers, with which he could attain whatever heaven was, along with a whole list of other random things in the process. As I said, Dio is just making shit up at this point. What 100 years on the bottom of the sea inside a coffin does to a man, I guess. The last third of the story revolves around the gang trying to catch Pucci before he reaches Cape Canaveral where he can fulfill Dio's plan, as he gets assisted by the sons of Dio who are drawn towards him. That's right, the sons of Dio. So apparently, Dio had 3 more sons somewhere out in the world, never noticed by anyone, not being able to use their stand powers until they met with Pucci. And what about Jojo? Why the hell is he not being drawn here? Is he still squatting down in Italy playing Mafia with his buddy Mista? Is he dead? I don't know, Dozaraki. Now I've voiced my issues I had with part 5, and now you're taking away Jojo's only interesting trait, his relation to Dio, and hand it over to these 3 clowns. Jojo's models of having sexy times with Dio was explained as a miracle, and now you're undermining that miracle and say there's 3 more people that somehow survived it. I don't really like this. It feels rather contrived and it makes me wonder if Araki planned this or just made it up at this point in the story. And even then, I'm not sure how I feel about some of the retroactive changes that got made to Dio. Sure, we didn't know much of him other than being the bad guy, but the whole Pucci was actually his friend thing bothers me. Dio legitimately being able to care for a human, I do not buy whatsoever. That is not Dio. Dio does not care about anyone but himself, and how he can manipulate humans to do his bidding, as he views them lesser than himself. But somehow he really trusts Pucci, even though he only met him a few times, and wants him to enact his plan to reach heaven. Sure, whatever I guess. Pucci is written in a way that it doesn't really conflict with anything, so I guess it works, even if his first meeting with Dio is kinda hilarious and weird. Why is Dio hiding in a church of all places until it's night? He's a vampire, I guess there's some irony in that, since he's an unholy monster. And then he just kinda jumps back into the shadows, like a mischievous little gay elf. What? Also, Dio in the newer art style doesn't really do it for me. I jokingly said he kinda looked like a fuckboy in the finale of part 3 when he got Joseph's blood, but now he's half as white and looks like a twink. I'm not a fan. Alright, personal gripes and complaints done, let's continue the plot then, shall we? It is at this point that the stands are getting really whack and powerful. The path starts off relatively simple with Goo Goo Dolls, a stand that can shrink the opponent. Wait, didn't we already do this with Little Feet in part 5? Or Manhattan Transfer, simply a way to reflect someone's bullets of it, or a stand that removes the gravity from an opponent. But, in the end of the part, we're getting absurd powers, like Bohemian Rhapsody turning every drawn character alive, forcing innocent bystanders to take their place in their retrospective media, or Weather Report creating rainbows that turn people into snails when touched or seen. Weather Report and Pucci's history is also revealed at this point, as he is his twin brother, but Pucci stole his memories after he tried to kill him to avenge his sister and lover. What do you mean? His sister was his lover? Aren't they brothers? And now you see, Weather grew up apart from the family, separated by birth, not knowing he had any siblings. So eventually he met his and Pucci's sister, not knowing any of the details, and fell in love, and Pucci had to pay off some men to break them apart. However, this escalated, and his sister ended up dying, resulting in Pucci getting revenge by using the stand arrow Dio gave him, which granted him a stand. It is at this point that we also learn of the detail that when a twin gets stabbed by the stand arrow and receives a stand, so does the other of the pair. So Pucci and Weather had a standoff, resulting in their entire town being turned into snails, before Pucci stole his memories and threw him in jail. Important to point out here is that the bloodline connection is also why Joseph and Jojo ended up gaining a stand before part 3 began. Dio used the stand arrow to gain the world, and since he was using Jonathan's body, this resulted in Joseph and Jojo gaining stands. Now it might just be me who initially missed this detail, or is this the first time this gets mentioned? and I guess it makes sense, I'm not going to complain here. And I suppose it also ties back to Joseph mentioning he was sick as a kid in part 4, since he also shares the bloodline, and it was around the time when Dio gained his stand. It does kinda ruin the mysticism behind Stan's origins, but it also doesn't answer why Avdol had one, as he was not one of Dio's henchmen. Nor Anasui in this part, since he received no disc from Pucci, so where do these other stands come from then? Unless he really is Iovolo's twin, which I joked about. Alright, back to the plot again. Pucci's stand ends up evolving into Sea Moon, which can completely change the gravitational pull around him in a large 3-kilometer radius, and then further evolves into Made in Heaven, which uses these powers of gravity to speed up time exponentially, until the universe itself resets. It was when this power got used, and seeing time sped up to such a degree when the main cast could not undo its effects, that I realized the world was truly screwed. There would be no turning back from this, and it legit made me go, well fuck, this power is terrifying. But I also feel that the scale of this stand might be the point where Jojo kinda jumps the shark for me. While absolutely terrifying, godlike powers like this from a single person is a lot to take in, especially if it's a villain I don't really care all that much for, honestly. As I said, the way Pucci is written in as someone so liked by Dio is still something I don't really buy. I can accept it, but it doesn't mean I have to like him. I found Kira to be a way more enjoyable and well-written villain, and looking back on things, I'd rather have had Dio being reborn somehow through the bone and baby. And with him achieving these powers, it turning out he used Pucci for his own evolution, backstabbing him in the end. Which is also another reason why it bothers me Jojo did not form a party with Josuke and Giorno of sorts, as he was aware of these plans to a certain degree. Every living stand user of the Joestar family fighting together and defeating the most powerful ally of Dio, who literally has the power to endanger the universe, would have been decided to be old. And it would be the culmination of the Joestar family getting together and defeating the cursed heritage and saving the world. Especially with me knowing that the next part will take place in an alternate timeline of sorts, it would have been the perfect capstone for all 6 parts. Instead, everyone in the protagonist's group, including Jojo who rejoined in for the finale, dies, except for Emporio. Which would have been another acceptable turnout for a finale with the villain winning, seeing the impending universe timeline reset for the next part. But instead, Emporio is the one who survives and travels to the next universe. And it is there that he is the one to beat Pucci with the help of Weather Report's stand, as after his defeat, he took the stand disc with him. I'm not going to lie, it's kinda sad Jolene gets robbed of victory in her own part and he gets it instead. Nonetheless, Pucci is defeated and the universe once again changes. But Pucci explained that people who die during the time acceleration before the universe changing lose their souls permanently, and won't return again in any other cycle, so Emporio struck with despair that his friends are dead. Which is until he notices Hermes at a bus stop next to the prison, and a car stopping that has Jolene, now calling herself Irene, and Anasui, now called Anarchist, within it. Now at this point, I got confused. As Pucci said, people who die during the time acceleration will make it to the new cycle, so how are they just alive and fine here, after seeing a fake Jolene and the goblins as fuck non-standard Jojo who replaced them in the previous cycle? So what happened? How are they alive again? So after thinking about it, and looking up some stuff online after the fact, because honestly this ending has made me feel stupid, I can only conclude that with Pucci dying and being the source of all this, he himself is deleted from the universe. Resulting in everything up and including part 5 just playing out normally, except part 6. Pucci never existed, there didn't need to be a new Jojo, so Jolene was named Irene instead, and with that I can only conclude that part 6 never actually happened. Jolene lives in peace, never had to gain a stand and fight, and Emporio is the only one with the dark and depressing knowledge that everyone he knew died and is now someone else. The end. Maybe you've already surmised it, but I feel conflicted about part 6. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either, and honestly, I think I'm going to need some time figuring out how I feel about it. I liked it more than part 5 at least, but it also makes it feel like nothing important ever happened in Italy. There's nothing of it ever gets brought up in any capacity, for better or worse. Hell, even the 6th stand error the Diavolo found never gets mentioned here, which is what I expected to be the source of the stands in this part, but I guess it's still somewhere out there. The first third is fine, the middle part dragged on maybe a little bit with an interesting stand fight as I said. The last third is absolutely bonkers with how weird the stands get, and the finale, well, I already said my part on that, so I won't rehash it. Also, I found that the first episode felt really disjointed, as we spent the episode shifting focus between different moments in time. It keeps shifting between the accident that got Jolene sentenced, her time spent in the holding cell awaiting transfer, where she gets a hold of the charm from Jojo that grants her stand powers, the courthouse where she got her verdict, and the trip to/arriving at the Green Dolphin prison. I assume it was done like this in the manga too, so I can't blame them for adapting it in the same way, but I feel it might have flown better if it was all just in chronological order. It also had to spend the first 5 minutes of the show listening to Jolene and Hermes talking about masturbation. Alrighty then, interesting choice, Araki. And seeing how the plot went, one thing still bothers me. Before Jolene goes to meet Jojo in the visitation room, Emporio shows up to warn her about entering the room, as it will doom everyone. With how the final episode was going, I expected this to be some sort of time loop at first, but that ended up being untrue. But still, what is up with this sequence? Why does Emporio warn her? Just because it's a trap he is aware of? Or does Emporio somehow know what is going to happen because he experienced it before, even though he ended up in the, let's call it, third universe instead of the first one? Has the universe looped already? Where's the forgotten plot point? Did Araki forget? Of course, I cannot talk about part 6 without mentioning the elephant in the room that is Netflix. It is safe to say that with how Netflix handled the release of part 6, it killed any amount of hype surrounding it. I remember people were looking forward to it, then it got dumped into a batch of 12 episodes in the fall of 2021, and that was it. No news when the next batch would be put out. Then about a year later, the next batch got released, and suddenly 3 months after that, the final batch got shed onto their servers without much fanfare, in a move that felt like they just wanted to be rid of it at that point. And maybe it's on me for not paying much attention, but there never was much buzz around it anymore anywhere on the internet after the first batch. I'll be fair, I also didn't really go looking for it, as I wanted to stay spoiler free until I could see it all in one go, which ended up taking a while. But it's pretty obvious that people in general did not like how it was handled at all. And I agree, I do not like this way of release. And it is equally confusing, seeing that Netflix was also releasing Komi Can't Communicate in the same season, but on a weekly schedule. I got no idea why they did it the way they did, it makes no sense. Why release Jojo specifically in batches only? Overall, there also seem to be some weird issues going on with the production of this part. A larger amount of stunts with CGI models for no apparent reason, and the choice of making all the inmates in the background of the prison grey silhouettes also did no favour, as it made the prison feel weirdly empty and devoid of colour, and the lack of colour variation in Jojo of all things is just absurd. And as I hit episode 12 while watching, we got the opening with sound effects, usually something kept for the final time we see said opening, well, barring part 4 which only did it on the finale. But the second batch just had the same opening again, making things weird because the opening showcased all the events that had occurred in the first 12 episodes, only at the end the animation was changed a little bit. You'd think that with almost a year in between, they would have had the time to make a new opening and make the anime look the best it ever did, but no, didn't happen. I'm not sure if Netflix is to blame for all of this, however, or if the issues lie elsewhere. We can only speculate on all of this in the end. Also, I cannot help but wonder if, partially thanks to how this deal with Netflix turned out, the David production has soured on the franchise to a certain degree. As Part 7 has still not been announced yet at the point of making this, and they've had their hands full with other properties like Undead Unluck and the USA Yetsuai remake, and part of me also suspects them to be working on the Fist of the North Star remake that got announced a few months ago, as it looks like something they would work on. Or perhaps their plan was always just to adapt these main timeline parts and nothing after. I also see a fair amount of people joking that Part 7 is never happening, because it is impossible to properly animate horses, and they are pretty important in Part 7. Time will tell. I also wonder if some of these perceived issues reflect on the soundtrack, going off the glaring omission of the intended second opening. I can't say that much of the new tracks other than Jolene's theme stood out to me, however, it did stand out to me that a lot of the music from previous parts got reused. Jojo's theme of course makes sense being reused, but at the various moments it was obvious that songs from part 3 got used. Dia's theme being used when any bad guy was planning anything was an interesting choice as well. Having mentioned the openings already, Stone Ocean by Kishida Kyoto and the Akaboshi Rockets was a nice surprise. I'm quite familiar with the group from their various doujin ranges, and of course the what I would call iconic opening from High School of the Dead. The song is great, but knowing of their other stuff, probably not my favorite from them. The second opening, Heavens Falling Down by Sun, is a rather melancholic final opening to the series. And it is nice seeing the 3D style of art from the openings from part 1 and 3 returning. And the final special version being used showcasing all the JoJos, the manga pages and the callback to the very first opening of the anime is an amazing sight to behold. The ending song, Distant Dream by Duffy, I didn't really care for personally. Each to their own musical taste in that regard. But it was great hearing Roundabout again at the very end, it was nice having that back. And I think that's about all my thoughts and ramblings on part 6. And with that, the Jojo video series comes to an end. Well, at least for the time being, whenever part 7 gets made, if ever. In the end, it ended up taking an entire year. Well, initially I just wanted to make something small for the 10-year anniversary for the anime, and this is what it turned into. Part 1 I never disliked as many seem to do. It's different, it's short, but I like what it tries to do, and it is a good encapsulation of an older era of anime and manga. And unsurprisingly, part 2 remains my favorite. Joseph is just too creative a character, and the villains, while not Dio, are entertaining enough. I also really like the Indiana Jones feel to this part, as I love those movies since I've been a kid. Also, the soundtrack is still amazing and the best of the series hands down. I feel like I've been Stockholm syndromed by part 3. While I initially liked it just fine, it has rapidly become my second most favorite liked part of Jojo. While it is quite long and drawn out, and the villains of the week are a hit and miss, the culmination of the final confrontation with Dio is just spectacular. But especially the last scene with Jojo, Joseph and Polnareff at the airport gets me whenever I think back to it. The bittersweet farewell, and the feeling you get after wrapping up a grand adventure is just so good. These 3 parts is what I consider to be the best of Jojo, and what Jojo is to me. Part 4 is a good afterstory to that grand tale, and I also grew to like it more than I did when I first watched it. However, for part 5 it is the other way around. The more I think about it, the more it just feels like a side story, as even part 6 never brought up anything from it. But when it comes to part 6, while I made these videos to tell my thoughts about these parts, and I certainly did say how I feel about some aspects, I'm going to need some time for it all to sink in. Even though it feels like a bit of a cop-out while I'm making this. Part 7 will probably eventually happen, and I will be back to make a video on it, though it is very likely that I will just have read the manga before that happens. Unless it gets announced like next week and it has later this year, but who knows really. If you have seen all of the videos and made it this far, I thank you very much for watching and sticking with me for this little adventure. If you somehow only happen to have seen this one, I'll still thank you anyway for making it to the end of this video. This one ended up being a bit longer than the other ones, and while it feels I've said a lot about part 6, it also feels I haven't even said half of it. Weird how that goes. Anyway, once again thank you. This was my name is Sora, and hope to see you next time.